Welcome to the Teapot Reads. My name is Sam. I'm the Teapot. This is what I am currently reading, and I am so happy to see you today. Hello and welcome back to my channel. Quick little note, I have not been posting super regularly recently. I have just been overwhelmed with work and something needed to take a sideline, and it was this channel. Hopefully I am back and ready to be posting regularly again. Hopefully I will be posting twice a week through, or at least in December. I would like to do summer and January because there's a lot of wrap-ups and things that I'm excited to talk about, especially as the year is coming to a close. I don't promise that, but that is the goal. So hopefully you'll be seeing my face more regularly, and hopefully, this is another big goal, I will be on top of comments. I do read them all. I just sometimes get a little overwhelmed in replying, not just to comments, but to general texts and everything. So I do read them. I appreciate them so much. They really mean the world to me, and I'm sorry that I haven't really been reciprocating communication. But we are here today to review some books, and I actually received early copies, though I'm reviewing this after both of them have been released for couple months now, of All of Us Villains and All of Our Demise. So this is an arc of All of Us Villains. I got it like 2 years ago or so, because this came out in November of 2021, and I think I probably got it in like September of 2021, and yeah, it took a while to read it. Not because I didn't want to read it, just like, you know, life. And I did receive an early copy of All Our Demise because this was one of, because I work at Barnes & Noble, and this was a pick of the month choice, and so they sent these out to pretty much every store. But thank you to the publisher, Tortine, for letting me have the opportunity to read these early. I'm sorry I didn't, but if I was more on top of my shit, I definitely would have. I really liked these books. I went into it expecting to draw a lot of comparisons to the Atlas 6, which I had read, I think, right before reading All of Us Villains. And are they both 6 characters? How many houses are there? No, there's 8 in All of Us Villains, but I just had the sense that they both had, Atlas 6 definitely more dark academia, but dark academia elements and very cool magic systems and a sort of sprawling cast of characters with varying moral compasses. But obviously All of Us Villains has a lot darker moral compasses, and I do think that comparing it to the Atlas 6 is a fair comparison on a lot of levels. So if you're not going to watch the rest of this video, my really short pitch to you to read these books it is Atlas 6 meets Caravel. That's not perfect, but I think that is a pretty good sort of comparison. I will also tell you right off the bat, I am giving these combined 4.5 stars, and I do believe that I rated them each individually 4.5 stars as well. They're really solid, really, really great duet to read, and they're fairly quick reads. What are they about? Honestly, I think you should read them back to back, because even though there is like a really good stopping point that it finds at the end of book 1, it is really one continuous story. And I think if this was sold on the adult market, it really would have just been one novel. And I don't think it would have been harmed by that, because the break is great and it works really well and doesn't mess with the flow at all. But being able to dive right out of All of Us Villains into All of Our Demise was fantastic and such a great experience, which is not something I can say about every single book I have read this year. But All of Us Villains centers on a competition that happens every so many years on the blood moon. I want to say it's like every other generation or so. I don't remember the exact amount of time, but the blood moon and blood veil. Hold on, I'm getting all my terms mixed. I don't know, maybe there's not a blood moon. I've just been listening to a lot of Taylor Swift. There is, anyways, a blood veil that happens. And basically, these 8... It is 8. I don't know why I keep double checking myself on that. Or is it 7? Shit. I'm so sorry. I am prepared. I have a whole review typed out. I just am. Let's see. I have to like mentally. 7. It's 7. I'm sorry, I'm just like all over the place. The 7 families have a competitor, each sends out a champion, and it is a fight to the death among these 7 kids. And the winner, their family gains control of high magic. And there's only one place in the world that has high magic, and that is here. And one family controls it until the next Blood Veil. And at the start of this book, we're right about reaching the Blood Veil. The champions are being announced, and Alistair Lowe, his family, is the one that has controlled magic for a very long time, or high magic. Everyone could have access to low magic, which is confusing because his last name is Lowe, but the high magic is the really like dangerous stuff, and it was thought to be extinct. So we are introduced to the characters who are champions, and we follow 4 of them through personal point of views, as right up until so the first book is like a lot of lead up to the actual competition, and then like the first half of the competition, and the second book is after that. I say the first half of the competition, but like it's like half competition, half lead up is what I'm trying to say. So we follow Alistair, we follow Isabel, we follow Gavin, and we follow Bryony. The characters are often what draw me into a book, but like 100% this one, I was obsessed with all of them. I loved our protagonists. I thought not only were the protagonists really well written, but all of the side characters were really well rounded and 3-dimensional, and I liked them as characters. I didn't always like them as people, like Alistair's family. I don't like them, but I enjoyed reading about them. And like I loved all our protagonists. I think the weakest one was Bryony for me, just because she is so much more of the Ned Stark archetype, but I do like her like villainous side too, because she does some dark shit. I was like Bryony every time she did something dark, but she really is like the heroic character of our villains. I loved Alistair and Gavin and Isabel, and I love Bryony, but those 3 really had my heart the entire time. They're just fantastic. So Isabel is the champion for her family, the McCaslins, I believe it's called, just McCaslin. I have to look at it. Hold on. McCaslin. Like Mac Aslan. McCaslin. So she is the champion for the McCaslins, even though she hasn't really had a strong connection with that side of her family. It's her father's side of the family. And she is sort of chosen on accident. She's the first champion who's announced, but she's only announced as champion because someone has leaked to the newspapers and the magazines that she is going to be champion. That was not in her books. That was not her plan. She did not want to be champion, and it is a huge sticking point for her. I really liked that. She is the reluctant champion, but at the same time, she has had the longest of any of these characters in the spotlight as a competitor and has kind of risen to the task. I really thought that was a really neat motivation and interesting character to build off of, especially considering how her motivations and plans change throughout the books. Then we have Alistair Lowe. He is the heir to the Lowe family. He is the champion chosen. He's known for pretty much his whole life, and he's been trained pretty much his whole life to be a monster so that he can win the competition and maintain that high magic for his family. He both detests his family and has really nothing else. Especially his brother Henry is his like anchor in his life. So he is a monster. He fully believes he's a monster, and he's, I think, my favorite part of the books. I love characters who think they're monsters that aren't monsters. Does that make sense? It's just like one of my favorite like character builds. And we have Gavin Grieve. The Grieve family has never won a tournament, and basically his whole family just chose him because they're like, well, someone has to die and we'd rather it be you than your brother or your sister. And so it's Gavin. So he has just been set up to fail his entire life. He has a really hard time getting allies, getting spells and curses out in the outside world, and that really motivates him in a really unique way. He's very much the lone wolf character. He is probably the most motivated out of anybody, and I would say probably the most villainous type character going into the story. And then we have Bryony Thornburn. I have to see it spelled out as well. I'm so sorry. Thorburn. Bryony her family are sort of viewed as the upstanding moral citizens, and we actually find that her family has ties to the government pretty early in the book, so I don't feel like that's a spoiler to say. And she very much views herself as a hero as well, and going to be the hero of the competition until it turns out she is not chosen to be champion. It's actually her younger sister chosen instead. And Bryony has to kind of come to terms with what that means, and like what that means for her personally, and also how to get into the competition. So I love them all. I thought they were really unique characters. And we have the other three competitors as well. Really the outstanding one is Finley, just because he's got ties to Bryony, but the other two, I mean, they're good as well. They're really interesting, and I think they have decent motivations. And I like that we don't need to know everything about the three champions or competitors that we have to know about the four that we're in the heads of, because there's a lot left unsaid with the other three, and it's okay. Like, they feel like full people. It just doesn't feel like we're pressed up close against them. So I think it worked really well. Coding every character, every protagonist, and I would say even past that, every character as a villain is really smart. You see this work in other YA stories, but I don't think I've ever read one where it worked so well as in this series, because these characters really do horrible things at different points across the series. And while it's not typically forgivable, some of the things that they do, because they're all coded as villains and they all are kind of bad people, it works. You don't feel like you have to spend a lot of time in the book moralizing why Alistair did what he did, why Isabel did what she did. You know, you just like, they're bad people. Okay, bring it on. Keep doing the bad stuff. And there are even, especially in book 2, the way certain characters end up. If it were a story where they weren't all bad people, you'd be like, that's horrible. How could that end up? Like, that feels problematic. It is. It's problematic. It is supposed to be. But it is the healthiest form of problematic you could get for these characters in these situations. And I loved it. I ate it all up. I thought it was perfect. Just across the board, fantastic, really smart to lean into. They're all the bad people. Really, really clever, really smart, and really let the story completely stretch its wings. And it does. These characters, when they say they're villains, I'm not going to say they're like out here dropping atom bombs and like molesting children, but they do some pretty terrible things. And they're definitely not the good guys if they were facing off against your typical YA protagonists. These are the bad guys. They work with curses. They are hurting each other. They are hurting themselves. They're making bad decisions and getting what they want. And it's great. It's just really fantastic. I already kind of touched on it, but the characters being very complicated and having very different motivations is fantastic. It is not only written well and believably, but it allows the characters to kind of twine in and out of like relationships and allyships with each other, alliances with each other, and following those alliances and difficult character decisions that were happening. They were almost always surprising. Like the the trajectory some of these characters take, especially in regards to each other, fantastic. Like, reflecting back on it when I finished the books, I was like, wow. You know, it's just great. It's just fantastic. If you really like the political maneuverings of Hunger Games, yes, really, really good. Really, really solid. I would say it even takes it up to another level in the like field of play. Really fantastic and really believable. Every time a character switched sides or allied with a different character, I was 100% on board. I was like, yep, that makes sense. That makes sense why they're doing that. And it makes sense why they would, not only why they agreed to like change to this character, but why this character is reacting the way they did. And, you know, sometimes the splits were mutual, and it worked so well. And I was so into it. And people who write complicated characters well, or want to learn how to write complicated characters well and really nail down character motivation and how that pushes a plot forward, take a lesson from these books, because it's fantastic and you learn a lot. The writing itself was really top tier. This is a co-writing project. I had never read anything from either of these authors previous to these books. Definitely going to be checking out both of them after this, and I'm really excited for the next project the two of them are working on together, which sounds 100% up my alley. Probably even more so than these did. So yeah, 100% right down there. I am I'm ready. Give me the content. The writing, it really was just fantastic. Like I said, super engaging, really complicated characters, and the world building was also top tier. The way the magic works is with mostly rings. Basically, they hold curses and spells in them, and then they can use their magic or use like they push out the magic through the rings. It's not as like intricately explained as like a Sanderson book would explain it, but it's explained enough that while reading it I understood the mechanics of it. I'm clearly not able to explain it well now, but you read it, you really understand the mechanics of it, and it's not just like, oh, magic exists. Like there's a whole spell crafting, curse crafting element to the series and to the books that I really enjoyed and found really interesting and engaging. It was entertaining to watch characters make their magic rings, and I was super into it. And it's also it's an exhaustive supply of magic, right? So the characters weren't end all be all super powerful all the time, and they did have to sort of weigh their magical costs with their casts. And that kind of magic system I'm really into. I do love super powerful characters, and I do love when the limits are not super easily definable, but this series really defines what the limits are and changes the limits on us several times throughout because of different complications over the course of the plot. It was really enjoyable, and again, just kind of kept the playing field uneven and bumpy and engaging. Because of the fantastic world building that was done, and because the complicated characters, there were a lot of great plot twists. It's at such a breakneck speed of storytelling that you almost don't have time to like take a breath and try to picture what's going to happen next. But even if you did, I don't think you could predict every single plot twist that happens. There are some that are a little more obvious than others, but every single one of them is just like fantastically done. I think even if I knew some of them going into it, I would have been still blown away by the delivery of them. It was fantastic. Really good. If you're looking for something that's going to keep you on your toes and keep you reading and your heart racing, this is the series for you. It wasn't like a perfect book series though, partly because there were just a couple weaknesses. And I do sort of grade YA books on a little bit more of a curve because they're not expected to do the same major things that adult books are made to do, but I do think that these were really well written, and so the weaknesses can kind of be taken with a sort of, okay, next time it will be better. I can only imagine that the pair of them writing together are just going to continue to grow their already massive talent, and it'll just like supernova at some point. But one of the weaknesses was actually the plot for me. So the characters were really good, and the plot in general was good. Like it wasn't a poorly written plot, it wasn't poorly conceived, it made sense beginning, middle, end. It had really good motivation, but it was just very basic. Take out the characters, take out the characters' relationships to one another, and it is a fairly boring plot. It's just kill everyone else, get the magic. And for some characters it becomes try to break the curse, and that's fine, but it really was a series of sort of fetch quests and battles. And while they were interesting because of the magic and because the characters, in a vacuum, it really isn't that interesting of a plot, especially for me. I've seen it done before, and it just sort of was. It didn't take away enjoyment of the book because I was caught up in all these other really great elements, but it definitely was something to sort of factor in when I was writing the review. I was like, the plot isn't strong. And I think that's why the ending itself, in almost every regard, I liked it. But the wrap up of the actual plot itself, I was like, that's it? Okay. Because I had kind of forgotten in the weeds of all the interesting things that there really wasn't much meat in that part of the story. And I do want to make it clear that I feel like a story, and these are maybe not terms as they should be used, but I consider the story everything that makes up the book. The characters, the world building, the plot, the writing, that's the story. But the plot itself is the, like, if you were going to write it out and take out like character does this because, you would just say, okay, well, Alistair did this, Gavin does this, Isabel does this, and this is what happens. Like character A is trying to do this, and then event 3 happens, you know, like the actual physical events on the page. And yeah, those were the parts that were just kind of boring, and I think really did hurt the moment that really should have been the climax of the book. It wasn't, there was an emotional point that comes right before the climax, which I think was delivered really well, but then there is like the actual climax of the plot, and that was just, it didn't do anything for me. I was like, oh, okay, not a letdown, but just about it, you know. Like I said, 4.5 stars. I really do recommend these books. I think they're fantastic. I'm actually going to be, because I have the Goldsboro edition of All of Us Villains, and my copy of All of Our Demise should be arriving soon. Hopefully. Goldsboro always takes a little bit to get it out here. I'm in no rush, but because I have those copies, I'm actually going to be packing these up and sending them to a friend who I think would really like them. And honestly, I do recommend these to just about everyone. I don't see a reason why you shouldn't read them unless it just really super doesn't sound appealing to you. They are fantastic books. The characters are fantastic. And I listen to the audiobook. So if you're looking for a really good audiobook to kind of keep your mind from like falling asleep behind the wheel, which is what I did because I drive like 3 hours to and from work every day, total. These are really fantastic. It made the journeys really, really enjoyable and something to look forward to. So yeah, All of Us Villains, All of Our Demise. These were fantastic. 4.5 out of 5 stars. Strongly recommend.